Hi, hello, and welcome to the first Data Lab meetup in 2025. My name is Laura Zoch. I'm Program Manager for Professional Development at the Data Lab, and I'm really excited to be your host tonight and guide you through an evening of tech predictions for 2025. So very warm welcome to our audience here in the Base Center, but also to all of you guys online. Thanks for joining us. Some housekeeping first for those of you sitting in front of me. We do not have any fire drills planned for tonight. So in the unlikely event that an alarm goes off, please make your way to the nearest exit. So tech predictions 2025. As we know, we live in a world of fast innovation in the tech sector. So I guess foreseeing what's to come over the next 12 months is relatively difficult. But I'm really lucky today to be joined by three amazing speakers who are experts in their field and who will share some insights and knowledge on what they think is supposed to come over the course of the next year. So we'll cover the widespread adoption of AI and generative AI, particularly over the past year, but I mean still ongoing, looking at the news. We'll look at new applications of AI and, of course, also on topics of ethics and regulation. We'll split the evening into two parts. So we'll kick off with a panel discussion shortly, and then there will be a Q&A afterwards. So please save your questions for the end. For our guests online, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. You might know that this event is part of the Data Lab community. It's a great place with more than 6,000 members, I think, and counting, to exchange knowledge, to learn, to connect and explore. So if you aren't a member yet, please sign up. We have a QR code up here and become part of our community. Also, if you've liked tonight and you want to spread the word, don't forget to tag us on LinkedIn. The Data Lab community profile is your partner in crime there for your posts. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to all of our Data Lab partners, without whose support this would be more challenging, let's say. Okay then, let's dive right into tech predictions for 2025. I'd like to ask my wonderful speakers to join me on stage. So I'm joined here tonight by Steph Wright, head of the Scottish AI Alliance, by Angus, Allan, product lead at CreateFuture, and Tom McLaughlin, applied AI solutions architect at Tomorrow AI. Welcome, and thank you for being here. Okay, hello. First things first, can you please introduce yourselves and maybe talk about what you're doing and also answer the question, what is the favorite part of your job? Steph, do you want to kick off?
I was looking expectantly at Angus there. Okay, turn the mic on. Ooh, hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Steph Wright. I'm the head of the Scottish AI Alliance. I'm hoping that a lot of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, it is the delivery body for Scotland's national AI strategy. The strategy was launched at the end of March 2021, and the vision was around Scotland being a leader in trustworthy, ethical, and inclusive AI. So those three values pretty much are the lens through which we do everything. We have a lot of key programs. I won't tell you about it tonight. Please do come and talk to me afterwards if you want to. But I'm going to very much be talking from a trustworthy ethics and inclusion lens tonight on a lot of the AI stuff. And obviously the strategy came out in the world before ChatGPT. So it's been quite a journey. In terms of the favorite part of my job, no day is the same, and no 2 days are the same. It's just been crazy, really. I mean, if you're all in the data and AI space, it's just kind of been nonstop, really, for the past few years. And the start of this year has been exciting, hasn't it? So, yeah, so that's my favorite part of the job. I truly believe that AI could do amazing things, but I have a lot of comments about how we're doing it right now. So I'll pass on to Tom.
Thank
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom McLaughlin. I am an applied AI solutions architect at Tomorrow. And I guess a bit about what Tomorrow do. We are a consultancy, and basically we help corporate and enterprise clients deeply integrate generative AI into their workflows and how they do things. And as a solutions architect, I help to design and also implement those solutions. So part of my job is architecting, part of it is engineering. So most days I write a lot of code. And what was the last part of the question? It was the favorite. The favorite part of my job is we have a lot of interesting problems to solve, and we work with a lot of really exciting clients to solve them. So that's it keeps it very fresh.
Amazing, thank you, Tom. On to you, Angus.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that's working. So hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Angus Allan, product lead at a consultancy in Edinburgh called CreateFuture. CreateFuture is, if you haven't heard of us, just shy of 500 people based in Edinburgh, but also across Leeds, Manchester, London. And we work with organizations of all sizes to help them make their product and propositions a reality. As a product team member, working with clients right from the start on helping define what it is we want to build, why we want to build it, through to helping development teams actually execute that. And I think the piece that I enjoy the most in my job is seeing it all come together. Do a lot of workshops with clients where we're using AI, using things like voice mode or custom GPTs, and just seeing people interact with this technology, sometimes for the first time, even still now, in this way, is just incredible to see that potential. And echoing Steph, I see a lot of potential, but there's also some concerns as well and things to talk about. But yeah, wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So let's dive right into the questions. So I've recently watched the videos of last year's event. So we do this every year. And last year, generative AI was a huge part of the discussion. So many questions: where would this go? Would we be able to reap the benefits of the technology for AI assistance, for example, and automation at work? Or in turn, would there be a reckoning, especially regarding the challenges around data quality, copyright infringements, and bias? So question for our panel today: do you think that the technology is less controversial now? Angus, do you want to kick this off this time?
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting to see the path that it's been on. Something that I've used a lot to anchor these kind of conversations is the Gartner hype cycle. So with lots of new technologies, when they're first being released, there's this huge explosion of interest and peak of expectations, followed usually by a trough of disillusionment, as it's called. And then we get to sort of a plateau of productivity. And we've kind of been through cycles like that in rapid succession. And there's almost a difference between what we're seeing in consumers and enterprises and also builders of AI systems. And something really interesting that I've sort of been noticing, and it's starting to be backed up by research, is how AI is turning off consumers and sort of suggesting it is quite controversial in some areas. So there's some research from Washington State University that said whenever AI is mentioned in product marketing, people are less likely to buy that product. And that doesn't match at all with what we're hearing about how amazing the technology is, how productive it can help make people, and all these other benefits that we know are true. And so there's a mismatch between what's happening in the general public, what's happening at enterprise, and then trying to sort of straddle that adoption line is really challenging. I don't think, especially with current developments in the AI space, I think that's going to get even more pointed in terms of some of the controversies around how the data is trained, how ethical it is, and likewise.
Absolutely. Tom, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that's definitely changed from this time last year and just before that is kind of public perception towards a lot of these technologies. So I guess I'll share a bit of a personal line with it, but probably just over a year ago, I was working at a different company, and I was doing tech consultancy, and we were basically sort of wrapping up quite a long-running implementation project, and we were sort of handing it over to the client. And the last task that we had to do, as always, is to actually write up documentation for what we've done. And I remember I used to travel down south to do this project. I traveled down, and we were having a meeting in person. And my suggestion was, we probably shouldn't invest too much time from an engineering perspective to actually write this documentation. Like, we have these tools out here which are absolutely excellent at doing this. It's not a particularly complex use case. We should do it. And I think the pushback that I got just over a year ago from doing that then versus now what we're doing with this technology only a year later is absolutely insane. So I think perception around the uses of this and how effective it can be has totally changed.
Okay, Steph, what's your take on the controversy?
I think it's still absolutely controversial, and I will have to disagree with what you're saying, that public perception has changed, because I think people are still, essentially the narratives are still so binary. They are so, it's amazing, it will solve all your problems, or it's going to come and kill you all and take all your jobs, etc. And that hasn't changed. It's actually just been amplified. But the truth is, a lot of what isn't being said is, all the studies around how actually things like Copilot and stuff aren't actually increasing productivity, that are justifying the investment. They're not the studies that you're hearing about. You'll hear the ones about, oh, how this absolutely transformed how my organization worked. And you're like, is it really though? Because I think the ultimate flaws with Gen AI is they haven't fixed them. Hallucinations are essentially part of how LLMs work. And so that problem isn't going to go away. So fair enough, if you work in a sector where, if it makes a mistake, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's not, you're not going to hurt someone. You're not going to, deny someone benefits or anything. But there are lots of cases where those tools are being applied, where those are the stakes. And a lot of it is down to pressure. There is this pressure that everyone must adopt AI, otherwise you're missing out. There's all these fear-driven narratives that a lot of organizations are being pushed. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't consider AI at all. I think every organization should consider AI, but they should also be fully aware that a perfectly valid conclusion of that consideration is it's not for us, it is not going to solve our problem, because AI, especially generative AI, is still being pushed as a solution looking for a problem, and it is not. Like, you should never approach the adoption of any technology that way, and that has not changed in the last 12 months. The copyright stuff, I was here 12 months ago doing these tech predictions, and I guess the reckoning around copyright didn't quite happen, but that's probably linked to the fact that it seems like these lawsuits take a really long time. I mean, there's been more and more and more and more of it, across the year. It's just none of them have been resolved yet. So perhaps that prediction for the next 12 months is partially true, because there are lots of copyright lawsuits, etc., being brought against companies, but they just haven't resolved yet. So I guess in terms of that prediction, it was sort of right. I'm not sure. But, public perceptions of AI are still as muddled and full of fear and anxiety as they were 12 months ago. And with the, I love the term trough of illusionment. That'd be a great metal band, wouldn't it? But I think more people are seeing that right now, but that's not what you're hearing. And like you said, that pushback against, AI-generated content is starting, But I'm not saying that there aren't great uses, of custom GPTs, etc. That's what a lot of you guys do, which is super, super helpful, Like we had, there's a report that I really want to read. It's 200 pages long, can't cope with that, kind of thing, don't have time. And so, creating a GPT to kind of like interrogate it is really useful, and it's obviously closed. You have a closed data set that it's looking on. So that's exciting. But in terms of prediction, I don't know if 12 months ago we could have predicted what's happening right now in AI. As you all know, there's a lot happening right now. This week, in fact, there's a lot happening. So anyway, could go on, but...
Cool. Yeah, I like that. We recently done some research within the Data Lab on data and AI skills across Scotland, and ran some focus groups in the frame of that research. And they basically confirmed what you just said, Steph, that irrespective of people coming from the private sector, the public sector, education sector, there's a little bit of anxiety around AI. People know it's out there, but they don't know on an organizational level how really to use it, how to reap the benefits, or if the risks are actually too high. So that was our feeling. It's still trying to figure that out. Sometimes the word co-pilot came up, that people are running the first sort of, trials, dipping their feet in the water there. But touching on that, I think I have a good question for Tom. Because with your work at Tomorrow AI, you're focusing on building autonomous AI agents or agentic AI for enterprises. So it's a little bit along these lines to help enterprises see the benefits of this technology. So can you talk to us a little bit about what agentic AI is and also where you see this going in the next 12 months?
Sure. Yeah, there's quite a lot to cover, I guess, on that. It's quite a big topic. Agentic AI is kind of everywhere right now. It's in the news. It's getting a lot of hype. Some of that justified. Some of it, I think I'd agree with you, Steph, not justified. And I think there's a couple of different ways of thinking about it. I think the way a lot of people, especially in our sector right now, are thinking about agentic systems is as a product. So there's certain products that are coming out from the likes of OpenAI. They developed Swarm to do agentic systems. Same with another company, Pydantic, produced the same thing. And we're basically seeing this sort of rinse and repeat of here's a product to do agentic AI. I personally don't think that's particularly useful or really what agentic AI is really all about. What I do think it is about is, I think from a human perspective, it's really useful as a way of us sort of decomposing problems into ways that we can think about solving them. So if we take a technical task, to make it agentic is to think, if this was done by humans, who would do it and what would they do? And basically try and break it down from there. And an analogy that I think is kind of somewhat useful, at least for me to understand this, is, I guess, yeah, okay, I'll tell a bit of a story with it. I started my career at JP Morgan as a software engineer. And before that, I studied computer science. So it was a pretty typical route into that industry. And I like to analogize that with LLMs. So my degree was basically my training as an LLM to give me the intellect to do that job. But on day one, when I started at that grad program, I objectively wasn't very good at that job because it's more than just raw intellect that you need in order to do that. So I think at that point, I was an LLM. And really what I had to do is become agentic. And what that meant was I had to be able to deeply integrate and embed into the workflows and tools that they used within that job in order to actually become really useful at it. So in my opinion, that's kind of what agentic systems is all about. You take the intellect and the raw intelligence that the LLMs can offer you, and you have to deeply integrate it into the systems and the workflows that you have within your business in order to make it useful. But then I guess there's one extra step after that. So if you just give it access to your tools, and I guess this is kind of your point as well, Steph, you don't want to then just, I guess, going back to my analogy, you don't want to take a graduate with a set of tools and then just be like, have at it, run the business. Like, that's terrible as well, right? So then you have to have your sort of control measures around to make sure that your actual scope of work is quite limited and there's only so far off course you can go. And you want to evaluate that over and over again until you get to a level of confidence where you can say, okay, you can now go into that business and be autonomous, and you can start to work within it. And I don't think we're there yet with the autonomous part. But I think, as you alluded to, we've got quite good at building like workflows which are quite agentic, where we have an LLM interacting with systems. So that's where I'd say we are with it right now. Where this will kind of go over the next 12 months will be diving deeper onto the actual integrations. So right now, we're sort of limited in terms of infrastructure to interact with different systems. And the more we build that out, the more useful it's going to become. So I think that's the focus.
Okay, well, from your perspective, Angus, at CreateFuture, you've grown rapidly over the past few years and onboarded quite a few well-known clients, I'd say. On your webpage, I saw Money Saving Expert, for example, Sky, Adidas, Tesco Bank, so really big household names. Could you tell us what some of the discussions you're having with your clients around AI? So what are the big companies looking for with these technologies? And how do you see this evolving? So is that going into the direction of agentic AI, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and seeing it evolve over the last 12 months has been really interesting. So typically what was happening post ChatGPT, as soon as it came out, is a client would come to us, there'd be a bid or an RFP that said, we need an AI to do support, we need an AI chatbot. But kind of to Steph's point, that's the solution looking for the problem. And the really interesting part, the difficult part in the early days was actually going back and pushing back and saying, what is it that a customer is actually trying to do? Because when you start framing it in the customer's language, then you can come to a solution that's going to help them solve their problems. And I can almost guarantee a customer doesn't wake up in the morning going, God, I wish this company had an AI chatbot that I could talk to. But they might be saying, I wish that company was easier to deal with. I wish I could get access to information faster. When I needed to return something, I could do it quickly. And then when you start framing it in those problems, you can then start to say, what could AI do well in that process? What is still really in the domain of what we're comfortable with humans doing? And that conversation's matured a lot in the last year. And so we're getting fewer organizations saying, I want a chatbot, and a lot more organizations saying, we have these problems, is AI the right fit? Is it not the right fit? And I think that's a really good mature discussion to have. And responsible, ethical use of AI is becoming a bit more of the discussion as well. So in line with taking that step back and thinking about the problem first, it's about thinking about the governance in that organization. What are you comfortable with an AI doing or not doing? Do you have red lines where there are things that you don't want AI to interact with or do on behalf of users in the company or customers? And that can then guide the discussions, because what will be good for a luxury consumer brand might be completely different to a mass market retailer. And so actually having strategic discussions about how and why we're going to use AI can then inform those product level decisions. And I think one project in there that I was really lucky to be part of that I think exemplifies some of this link in with responsible AI was Money Saving Expert. So we built an AI chatbot for Money Saving Expert into their mobile app, and part of that whole process was about making sure it's trustworthy, making sure it espouses the values of what is one of the most trusted news sites in the UK, and that then informed the product decisions about what we did and didn't want it to do. And I think, and I hope, clients are getting a lot more mature in thinking about that, as opposed to just, here, build a chatbot for me. And that gives me a little bit of hope that we're getting to a better spot with how we build out these solutions.
Super interesting. And I was going to ask, do you see massive differences across sectors in what people are asking for? Or is it mostly, interaction with users and consumers, or is there a different element to it as well?
I think there's some differences. A lot has been focused, I think, on internal processes, and that's where Agentic AI is an interesting paradigm shift, because we're quite used to AI being almost like a swivel chair. You ask it a question, gives you an answer, and then you go off and do something. But we're getting to the point where the system can either recommend the next step and can perform the next step, or if it's in some guardrails, it can go off and actually execute some kind of process. And that's fit quite well with internal sort of operational optimizations. I think there's a lot of scars from public-facing debacles. There's DPD was in the news, Air Canada. I've said to some people back in New Zealand, where I'm originally from, a supermarket launched an AI chatbot. In my mind, not following why do people want a chatbot for the supermarket? And it was giving out suggestions for how to make chlorine gas at home and all these things that you wouldn't want it to do. So I think, that's getting to a point where I think there's some of those scars companies have quite rightly held on to. We don't want systems doing that. And it's raising some really important questions now when we're talking about the UK and how we want potentially AI to be all across the public sector. That gets into a lot more life and death, to put it that way, in terms of what we're doing with things. So.
Definitely, yeah. That's a very good transition to my next question as well. Thank you so much. So the UK government has made a strong commitment towards AI very recently with the publication of their AI Opportunities Action Plan. Where do you see the widespread use of this technology heading in 2025? And in particular, what steps do you think are necessary to encourage the responsible use of AI, and in particular in the public sector? And I'm going to come to Steph first, please.
I have many comments about the UK AI action plan, but a key bit which they have been hammered on is the complete lack of mention of ethics, public trust, civil society, etc. It is all focused on economic growth, aligned with the big tech agenda, ultimately, and that is problematic because really conversations about economic growth need to be discussed in terms of sustainability as well. And just to focus on economic growth for economic growth's sake is not sustainable for society, for the economy, etc. So I think it was a big misstep on that, and lots of organizations have called them out for that, especially with the whole focus of, yeah, we're going to transform the public sector with AI. And you're like, but zero mention on how you get the public to trust AI. You can spend all the money you want, changing all your public services to be AI powered, etc. But if the public do not trust you, there's absolutely no point in doing it. And the public sector has a duty of care because ultimately they are there to provide services to the public. So in terms of that, and I think a key thing around ethics and responsible AI, etc., is something I speak a lot on, is we need to change the narrative around that, because lots of people and organizations view discussing ethics, discussing inclusion, discussing safeguards and responsibility as doom and gloom. Let's focus on the fun stuff it can do, the cool stuff, the money it can make. But I just don't understand why that is the dominant narrative, because surely creating uses of technology that benefit everyone should be a good thing, and that should be the default. The sheer fact that we have a term, responsible AI, safe AI, trustworthy AI, seems to imply that the default is not responsible, it's not good, it's not safe. We should be calling out the bad stuff instead of calling out the good stuff, because the default should be the good stuff. And how did we get here? It's because right now the dominant narrative is driven for, profits driven, ultimately. It's not about societal benefit. What the UK AI Action Plan, it's not going to benefit the SMEs, which make up, 85% of our economy. They will benefit those companies that have the resources and the capacity to take advantage of a lot of these initiatives. And the truth is, loads of SMEs have no idea what AI is and what it can possibly do for them. But that's not who we're talking to, right? We're talking to the big companies that have that capacity and ability to do it. But they are technically in the minority. Like I think the statistic is 85% of the economy is made up by SMEs. And a lot of them are one-person companies, 5-person companies, etc. They cannot afford to ask CreateFuture to create a responsible chatbot or ask Tomorrow AI to come up with an agentic system to help them work better. So how are we going to help those businesses? And they're the businesses that are essentially the backbone of the country. So I think the whole ethics debate, some people are like, oh, I'm sick of hearing about ethics. It's like, but I just don't understand, because talking about ethics, making sure that things don't cause harm, that are actually for the good of as many people as possible, that's a good thing. That is a joyful thing. So, it's like technology is there to help us live better lives, right? And for all. It's like, can you imagine, the invention of the wheel was only reserved for those, who were able to access it, and everyone else, don't have to bother. You just have to use whatever you want. And it's just problematic, the current narrative, and more people need to speak out. More civil society representation. More, we supported the launch of a 3-year review into the future of work. On Monday is the Pissarides review from the Institute of the Future of Work. They carried out a 3-year review into the future of work and how AI and automation will impact the future of work and well-being. And one of the key things, which all the papers picked up on, was that AI and automation will completely increase inequalities in society. And that's like a pretty damning, result. They interviewed thousands of companies and people. And so what can we do? We need to change that narrative. We need to change the approach. And no one is brave enough to stand up and say, actually, you know what? What we want to do with AI in this country is benefiting everyone, instead of we want to be the superpower. We want to be it's like, was it mainlining AI into our veins? Wasn't that the actual term? I think all of us when we read that, it's like, what? I'm sorry. And it's all about supercharging and being a, frontier AI, and it's all, I can go into saying how it's links to colonialism and things like that, and sovereign AI, homegrown AI. Well, we've seen what those kind of initiatives has resulted in. DeepSeek, that the situation of DeepSeek has come out of the whole US trying to hold on to their monopoly and like pushing in all these, restrictions on how, what countries can get chips and stuff like that. So people have then gone off and said, well, we'll do it a different way then. And then it's massively, disrupted it. It was like $500 billion was wiped off, NVIDIA's stock. It's just nuts. And also on that basis, most people can't even grasp how much $1 trillion is, or 500 billion. The UK government's saying we're gonna, commit 14 billion. Then 2 days later, the US is like, oh yeah, we got 500 billion, talking about that. And these numbers are just insane and just of a completely different level of playing field than the majority of people and organizations. So gonna get off my high horse. But I think, like I said, I truly believe AI can do amazing things. The potential for it to do incredible things. But right now, the driver for the AI development is not for the benefit of all, for public benefit, and that needs to change.
Thank you, Steph. Tom, Angus, what's your view on responsible AI and ethics? What are the most pressing questions to ask in your point of view?
So I completely agree with the sentiment that it seems strange that it is almost thought of as separate. And one of the things that I've tried to as much as possible do in my work is to say, well, it's not a separate box to tick. Like we build the AI and then we tick a box, say, oh, we did it responsibly. It's just from the start, how are we going to do this and integrate this responsibly and ethically? And so I'd like to think in a microcosm, the work that we did with Money Saving Expert espoused some of that in terms of we had some really clear values and principles of how we're going to build it. What does it mean for a user? How do we make it transparent? And that was then able to result in a product that then in the marketplace has done quite well compared to the competitors. And kind of the message that I want to land with enterprises as much as possible is that responsible AI can be a competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at it from almost like a game theory perspective, if everyone's going out and launching AI systems to the public, then instead of it being a race to the bottom and you get all these solutions that no one wants, that people don't like, that result in headlines all around the world, you have something that actually solves the problem that people like to use, that does a good job and treats people well. In a cynical way, you'll have a better product that's going to be more commercially successful. So they shouldn't be separate. And I think interesting tell from the AI Opportunities Action Plan that has a whole section dedicated to training the future workforce of AI researchers, which I think is good, but there's no section addressing how you're going to train the future workforce that's displaced by AI. And so there's all these really fundamental questions that aren't being asked around that. And if you apply a responsible sort of framework to it, and there's all sorts of Microsoft, Google, they have all these frameworks that are easily accessible in terms of how you can think about using AI. You'd see what's being published doesn't match up to that, but at an enterprise level, there's an opportunity if you actually do those things and just make them a normalized part of this is how we do business. it's actually going to be better for everyone. So I'm trying to take the adopting those principles into the work itself approach.
Almost sounds like, beating the business from within in some ways, tackling the problem at its root. And that also speaks the language that the public is aware, and they are expecting that technology to work for the good, as you said, Steph. And I think that's a very good sign to me, at least.
Produce a better product.
Absolutely, yeah. Tom, what do you think?
I think some really interesting points. I think to follow on from what you said, Angus, it does sometimes feel like there's a bit of a race to the bottom on the go right now. But I think there's one particular company which I think does quite well on this, and like cards on the table, I'm a big fan of them already. But Anthropic as a company are probably leading the charge in terms of responsible AI and explainability within their models, which is something that not a lot of the other labs were focusing on straight away. And it's almost a bit frustrating because I think the likes of OpenAI, they put out a lot of products and it's super exciting and everyone wants to try them out and you want to see what the latest and greatest things are and you want to play with them. Anthropic for me is one of these companies that they release much, much slower. So they're almost like a little bit boring because of it. But you're like, the quality of the products that they put out is exceptionally high. So it's like, it's almost as if we're sort of used to everything being fast and everything has to be here now. Whereas there are companies that are trying to take it slow and say, let's take a sensible approach to this. Let's check that this works. Let's actually understand what we're doing here and what the models are doing. So yeah, it's a little bit frustrating that they don't get as much limelight as other companies do for that sort of stuff. But I think, just to touch on some of your points as well, Steph, I think the responsibility part, it of course does sit on government, but I think it sort of sits on all of us. So absolutely. It's, I think the actual companies producing models, they have to take the responsibility for that as well. And I think Anthropic sort of leading the way with that. I was listening to an interview with Dario, who's their CEO recently, and he had basically said that as a result of us choosing that strategy to focus on responsible AI and explainability, OpenAI have basically now made that one of their major streams of work because they're like, in order to compete, we have to focus on this. So I think that's good to see that that's being adopted just as part of the market. It's like you have to do this, otherwise it's just not going to work. And then I think the other sort of aspect is like from an individual level, we also have to be responsible in how we use this, and also I think in the choices around using it. So I think obviously models inherently carry a bias from the data that they're trained on, from the labs that trained them, and as a result of that, they essentially carry a bit of a worldview on basically based on what they've been trained. So I think from an individual level, we have to be quite careful in terms of what worldview do we want to adopt in our models. But I think the bigger part is that we actually have to have the awareness there in the first place that they do carry that. And then to have our cards on the table to say, okay, we want to adopt that, but we're not so comfortable with that. I think, yeah, we need a bit more explainability there.
I think I respectfully disagree that they carry a worldview. It is well known that data that any of these models are trained on does not represent a worldview because what it is trained on is just as important. What is not trained on is what's important. What is absent from the data that is being trained on? So it most certainly is not a worldview. For example, there is at least half of the world that is not represented in the data that these LLMs are based on. So absolutely, I'm sorry, I have to disagree. It does not have a worldview. And but yeah, Anthropic, great. I mean, I think the problem is at the moment is that no one really has a model that is exceptionally better than anyone else. So the only advantage that any of these companies can have is throwing out new things as fast as possible to just get that little gain and that stock price rise or whatever, kind of thing. And that's why they're pushing it out fast and not responsibly. So Anthropic not playing that game is a good thing. But it is because all these models, the differences in their performance are minimal. So I guess, what they say is that no one really has a moat. No one has a unique, OpenAI had that because it was the first out. But everyone else is caught up now. And the irony of it being called OpenAI when it's not, it's all open, is also the problem. But yeah, Anthropic are interesting. I think their approach are definitely interesting. But like right now, it's still OpenAI, that's the big player, and Llama, etc. But it's just, I'm just thinking back to, like, remember when Sora came out and everyone's like, wow, and then you look a bit deep and go, whoa. and it took like how long before they actually released it to the public? And even then, they haven't really fixed everything that people commented on, but they still push it out there. I think in an ideal world, as a product person, you wouldn't want to put a product out there that doesn't really work, or only works some of the time, but it's because of this needing a market advantage, because it's the race to the bottom, right? like you said. So yeah, it's complicated.
It certainly is, and what a complex field. I'm sure we could discuss this for hours. Unfortunately, I'm conscious of time, so I want to keep us on time. I wanted to touch on the relationship of government and tech companies, but maybe that's one for the Q&A. How about that? So my final question for all three of you will be carrying on a little bit of a tradition that I believe was started last year. What is your tech prediction word of the year 2025? And can you give us maybe a 1 to 2 sentence explanation why that is? Who wants to take the lead here? Tom, you go first, thanks.
I thought about this today, almost. I thought about this today. I think I'm split between 2 words, so I will cut down the middle. I was between adoption and integration. I think, in truth, it's probably adoption through integration. And it kind of touches on what I'd said about agentic stuff earlier on. The models right now, performance-wise, is getting actually really quite impressive and really quite useful. But we need to integrate them deeply in order to make them business useful. So I think that's what we'll see.
Adoption through integration, that's number 1. Angus, what's yours?
It's probably going to be a synonym of that. Convergence. I think all these trends are starting to come together, the geopolitics combined with the responsible aspect, combined with the integration. And a point that I kind of remind myself a lot about is, even if we had no more breakthroughs in the science behind AI and the AI models never got better, we've still got years and years and years of products that we could build based on the technology that's available today to create new experiences. Of course, the technology we'd expect to keep getting better. So there's this big theme of it all coming together and integrating it so that people have more access to it.
Okay, amazing. Steph, what's your tech prediction word?
Oh God, I don't know. Change, I think. I think what's been happening this week has shown that it is very volatile to change, and I think I'd like to see 2025 perhaps diversify in terms of the leading voices in this, that there might be different worldviews put out there. That I'd like to see that kind of Silicon Valley dominance be challenged. It might be for the worse, it might be for the better, but to dilute that a bit would be great. Or maybe dilution, I don't know. Distillation, maybe, that's the word, because that's the hot word right now, right? Because that's what DeepSeek has done with like OpenAI's models. Maybe distillation is the thing, right? But yeah.
Okay, perfect. Definitely more diversified than last year. Just for anyone interested, last year the tech prediction word was co-pilot. So, we're clearly seeing the evolving landscape there.
The failed promises, right? The trough of disillusionment, like.
Definitely. Okay, I'm happy to open up the floor to some Q&A questions. Let me just get the microphone off me and onto you. So just raise your hands in the room or pop your questions in the chat. Okay, I see a question just here. Coming to you.
Yeah, hi. Excellent views. How do you use AI for coding?
Can everyone in the room hear? How do you use AI for coding was the question.
In a word, or in 2 words, quite a lot. I guess a bit deeper than that. I think it's a very interesting topic, and I think it's also quite a fast-moving topic, and it's probably not what it was over a year ago, and certainly not what it was I guess 2 years ago now when I started doing it. My workflow for how I use it now is actually quite similar to how I used to write codes before ChatGPT and the likes of Claude was a thing. But I think what it gives us now is the ability to sort of work one level of abstraction up. So previously, you're writing code at the sort of functions level, whereas now your role is almost a bit more architecture. So it's like, figure out what main components you want to have in your system, flesh them out a little bit, but not to the level of you've written every line of code, and then fill in the blanks using these models. And I think that's probably the right way of going about it, but it's still, I mean, it's still to play for, I suppose. And the reason I would say that is I think the skill set that's going to be really, really useful is that higher level architectural skill set. I think when we look at sort of model performance compared to like code forces and the sort of benchmarks for writing code, most of these models now are actually outperforming a lot of humans. So I think you have to have a pretty big ego as a programmer to be like, I shouldn't write that line of code, or I should write that line of code above it. So I think from that perspective, it's like you should do the stuff that we're good at, high level kind of architecting, and then working down the way. But I think at the lowest level, there's a good chance an LLM is better at writing it than we are.
Can I ask you a question, a follow-up to that? How do people learn to code then, if they never do that?
I think that is an absolutely fascinating question. And I think that is like a major challenge that we're going to see, especially at like the university level. Mm-hmm. And I think this also kind of contradicts like some of the stuff. I know kind of Meta had come out and said that they were going to put a freeze on like hiring mid-level talent. Mm-hmm. It's like, whoa, how do your juniors become seniors? Yeah. Like, yeah. So I think this is a really big question and something that universities and stuff are going to have to really do a lot of thinking around.
Yeah, but from what you're saying, it's more about, you know, human AI or tech interaction in some ways, because you'll need a basic level at least of coding and understanding to then have the AI fill in the gaps. So sounds like a good sort of coexistence.
I would say that that's where we are. Yeah, right now we're working like hand in hand, and I think that's a good place to be. And I think it can. I mean, I like to see these as tools. I don't like to see them as replacements. I think we still need to operate them at this stage. They're definitely very much tools.
Okay. Do I have another question? I think you had your hand up first, so there you go. Thank
you. Vice from Scottish Enterprise. There's a lot of discussion about ethics and stuff like that, but I'm just more interested, I want to understand more about the supply chain for AI, because I believe that a large language model consumes a lot of power, and that's very contradicting to net zero. And I think I've it's one question, but it's just two bits of it. So I just want to understand also, when they talk about different chip architecture and all that sort of stuff with DeepSeek, is that something that would consume less power? Or I don't know, because it seems like there's a lot of hype on the usage, but on the part where the delivery and the supply, that's not really addressed for prediction of 2025. Yep. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. For those in the room, the question was around sustainability of AI technology, energy usage. Energy usage as well. Sustainability of AI and energy usage.
Sustainability, but we haven't even got started on that tonight. The environmental impact, and that's not just it. The power consumption, the water consumption. It is also the supply chain that creates the data sets, the training data sets, the supply chains that create the chips. Ultimately, it is a very extractive industry of labor, of an exploitative industry of labor, and an extraction of minerals, etc. AI, because of the way it is talked about, a lot of it is very much here's the tool, but what is the supply chain to develop that and deliver this tool to you is hugely problematic. The DeepSeek thing, the sheer fact that it uses less power is a good thing, and perhaps this might change the narrative, because I think a lot of the commentary on this is that, the OpenAI narrative of, you need $500 billion to do this, it is being challenged by someone else that says, actually you don't, and you don't need to use that much power, you don't need to build small nuclear reactors, kind of thing. And it's challenging that paradigm, and I think the more differing views is a good thing, but the environmental impact, the supply chain issues, major issues. But from a technical perspective, I don't know if you guys want to say anything.
do you see that happening for the prediction this year, like on the supply chain part?
The question is, do you see that happening as part of this year's technological advancements, basically sustainability of the supply chains?
I like to think so. But that's wishful thinking, perhaps, because most people don't even it's only very slowly people are realizing, actually, the environment, the impact these things have on the environment is pretty major. The power consumption, the water consumption. There are many cases of, data centers, like there's one town in Texas or something that had a data center, like there was a drought in the town closest to the data center because it consumed its water supply. And it's just like, that's just problematic. So like, the UK AI Actions Plan of these growth zones where there's going to be all these data centers, there's a lot of consideration that needs to be put in place in terms of whether our grid can cope with the power demands that it needs, and the water supply, and where does the heat go, and it's just. I know there are really innovative projects around that about the heat produced from data centers powering local towns and stuff. We need more innovation in that sense, because if that's the direction we're going, it can't be sustained in the current direction it's going.
Okay, I'll come to an online question next. Sorry. It's one for Steph, and one that I didn't get to ask before, really, more specifically around AI ethics again. So, Steph, my public sector organization is about to implement an AI assistant on our phone lines. What first steps should I take to make sure we do it ethically and responsibly?
Ask yourself the question is, do you need to? And why are you doing it? If you have a genuine reason that it's a problem that due to capacity or resource or something, it's not because you want to cut costs, then yes. But then, I spoke with a third sector company, a Citizens Advice Bureau. They implemented an AI assistant. And what was brilliant was that the guardrail they put in place, that a human is accountable for all the decisions it makes. So that was their red line, that any decisions made are accountable to a human. And I think in a public sector organization, having that, I think the conversation around human in the loop has moved a bit to human in control as well, which I think is really, really interesting. I was at an event last year where someone was talking about human in control, and someone in the audience said, oh, but we're building these models now that might not be possible anymore. And she very blatantly said, then you should maybe stop. It's like, why is that such a bizarre decision to make? If you can no longer control what this thing you have created will do, why are you not stopping? and that, to me, just seems like a bizarre approach to it, that's even a question.
Yeah, that just confirms a little bit of what you mentioned before as well, Angus, with companies really questioning, do we need this? And what's a sensible way of integrating that technology? And where do we just use it for the sake of using it?
I think to add to the answer to the question, even just looking at some of the publicly available responsible AI frameworks and just looking through some of those questions, even things about transparency. So does the person on the other end of the phone know that they're talking to an AI, or AI is assisting in the process? We use AI a lot in our jobs as product managers and engineers, and a very similar principle is that we're responsible for everything that it does. In the same way, if I use Gmail to send an email, I can't blame Gmail for the email that I wrote. It's a tool that I've used. So having that custody almost of what the AI system is doing and who's responsible for it is important.
And qualities impact assessments as well, especially as a public sector organization. You need to ensure that by creating this tool, you're not creating, inequity in access to your services.
Absolutely. I think accessibility is a huge topic as well. We have probably time for another question here in the room. Do I see another hand up? I have one, so...
So actually, the entire conversation today has been about Gen AI. And 3 years ago, if we'd had this discussion, deep learning would have come up, but it wouldn't have dominated the whole conversation. So can I ask, it doesn't have to be a one-word prediction, can I ask you all for a prediction for 2025 that's not about Gen AI, but is about the rest of data and tech?
Okay, so the question is about a non-Gen AI tech prediction for 2025. Tom, what's at the top of your mind?
For me on this is almost a bit of a cheeky answer because it is still similar to the Gen AI stuff, but I would say protocols. So basically what we're seeing just now kind of coming through is stuff like, from Anthropic, they've designed this protocol called MCP, which is basically for LLMs to have a way to talk to other services. And I think what we're going to see is a bit of an influx of that type of investment. How can we talk to whatever it is, your database, your knowledge base, how you do your emails, how you do your comms, like that kind of stuff will kind of blow up.
Angus and I look at each other going, ah. I think it's a great question because, AI existed long before Gen AI, and right now everyone talks about Gen AI. And when people think about AI, they think about Gen AI. And I'm longing for the days of going back to the fact that there is many other forms of AI that can do incredible things that isn't all hype, I don't know. I mean, in terms of general data awareness, I'd like people to be more aware, to know that there is, if they're interested in AI, that they can become interested in more than just Gen AI. But I don't know how to say that in one word.
Another sort of non-answer answer, but crossover. I think all the trends we've been talking about do apply to traditional machine learning, and all these questions about ethics and bias, they're just as important in discriminative AI and other techniques. And so I think the light that's being shined on a whole to what we're doing with Gen AI and the impact that has on society, it's actually shining a light on lots of businesses that are coming to us saying we want to build something with AI. We're saying, oh, you're already using AI. Oh, are we? And then oh yes, you've been using AI for the last 15 years or so. So it's almost like that crossover of the trends sort of coming together, and I hope a lot of these discussions that we've been having tonight do come back to the wider AI field and can improve it.
Yeah, and coming back to the research that we did within Data Lab, I would probably add just data adoption. I mean, what we found is that, and you alluded to that before, Steph, that even data skills are relatively low. Data maturity, we are not at super high levels in Scotland, at least, across the sectors. So there's still a lot to be done, and AI is more on the higher end of that spectrum, right? It's a very complicated technology, but it's more encouraging people to even using data and recognizing where data is and how they're interacting with it and how to increase efficiency just by doing that, and not necessarily even then going into LLMs and really complicated stuff would be my hope, let's say, for 2025. I've been told we have another 5 minutes, so are there any more questions in the room? I see another one, so I'll get up again.
I do have a question regarding responsible AI, because as a student who study AI, I have an awareness like we have to build a model which is safe and responsible, but it's hard for us to have maybe like a regulation or criteria to tell us how to define whether this model or this AI service is safe, is responsible. And my worry is that the responsible AI narrative is not dominant, is people think it's too abstract to define whether a service is responsible or not, so that we cannot, even as developers, we cannot, while we're building our models, to show our responsibility while delivering this service to the public. So I'm wondering what are the common practices in terms of responsible AI, and what direction can we do more in terms of building a more responsible AI services to the public?
Okay, so the question was around the development of responsible AI. Are there any best practices? How do we as users also recognize that an AI system is responsible, safe? I don't know. How to evaluate AI, probably.
Well, I think Angus touched on there's lots of fantastic responsible AI frameworks out there. So part of me would say there's a flaw in how you're being taught if that's not, a serious consideration in like training, the AI engineers of the future, that, essentially that they feel it's hard to do responsible development because it should be hard, right? Like if it's easy, it means you're probably not doing it right. But there are lots of frameworks out there, and there's a burgeoning, AI assurance field, AI safety field, and AI validation kind of thing. There's a lot out there, but I don't agree that you guys need to individually go find it. It should be an integral part of your course, really, on how to do this. I don't know how it's being taught, but I mean, as actual practitioners, it's not like there's nothing out there to help you, is there?
No, it's definitely relying on the frameworks and even asking the question so that when you're implementing an AI system, are you actually evaluating the end result for biases and other things that you need to be aware of? Because there's the model stage, which the labs should be taking care of. That's debatable, and there's lots in that. But then when you're actually implementing it, can you test it and evaluate it and to the most degree you can quantify if it's hitting those aspects of responsible AI? So the ones that we've used a lot have been the Microsoft and Google ones because they're very in-depth. So they have the principles, but then they have pages and pages of how to apply the principles as well. And that really should be embedded at every stage of the development process. And if that's done right, hopefully that leads to better outcomes, which then incentivizes them to be used more.
And ethics should be core to any training, I think. But over to you.
I think what you say is fair, though, right? Like they are abstract for a lot of cases, and I would say that is almost like a sector by sector thing, right? You will get certain sectors that have quite rigidly defined sort of frameworks for operating within. But I would also say it's down to sort of like individual requirements as well, right? And we have to sort of define them for ourselves. Like, what does responsible AI look like from your perspective? Might be very different to what it looks like from someone else's. And what I would say, like, that also applies across sectors, right? So some of the stuff that we would build for some of our clients, say some of which are in the sort of game space, we would almost follow a completely different framework for them to what we might do if our client was in, say, defense. Like, that's going to have a much stricter framework. And also you have to, like, I guess the other thing, this stuff is still relatively new. So for a lot of these sectors, it just won't be defined. And I guess, like, from an AI sector perspective, as in like within universities, it's probably not the major focus as well, right? Because it's all about, let's build the latest and greatest tech and let's build the latest and greatest models. Maybe we just need a bit more focus on actually looking back and thinking, oh, there's other things around that we need to focus on.
I think that's what the focus is on, building the latest, greatest things without thinking about how that would actually impact people. Because ultimately, it's people that develop models, and it's people who make decisions to deploy the models, and it's ultimately people that are impacted by these models. And to not consider people in that entire process, is doing a disservice to society, and I think, ethics and, and even on a basic acknowledgement that, your very bottom baseline standard is this violating anyone's human rights? Like, if you start there, go up, but like, but that's like your minimum, right? That has to be your minimum. And I know, but the fact is there are lots of people developing models that don't impact people, really. I had a really interesting conversation with someone today who said that up in Aberdeen, there's a really vibrant sector of people developing AI tools for the oil and gas sector. And, they're developing and they're just trying to develop tech and on products. And I was like, ooh, where does ethics and responsibility like fall into that process? And they said, it's a bit different because it's all about assets. It's not actually about people. So the ethics requirements are perhaps less prominent because they talk about equipment as opposed to actual people. So I guess that was an interesting perspective that I suppose, if can you be unethical to a, I don't know, a cog? So I think that's quite interesting. So back to your, it's different cases as well in different sectors and different uses. If you're developing a model that will recommend the next song to someone. You know, like I say, Spotify, all those algorithms. It's low stakes, you know. It's like I'm not sure what. Maybe the ethics comes into how it recommends based on returns to an artist, etc. But in terms to the consumer, I guess the ethics threshold is quite low, you know, because if you get recommended the wrong song, it doesn't matter. But if you're developing a model that that's designed to detect cancer, but it's like trained on unrepresentative data sets, and therefore, say if someone of color comes in and you can't diagnose whether they have skin cancer because your model hasn't been tested for, you know, different diverse data sets, etc. That has high stakes, and there's a responsibility to make sure that you think that through properly. So this is the problem with AI in general. It's not one size fits all, because there isn't one definition of AI, there isn't one AI technology, there isn't one use of AI either, and it varies depending on the use case.
Okay, I think that's the time that we had for questions, but we're moving on now to a very fun part of these community meetups, which are our open mics. So our community members have 30 seconds for an announcement, maybe to promote your work, request support. Do I see any volunteers in the room tonight?
Stand-up set.
No? No requirements today? Okay, well then at this point I'm going to move on, and thank you so much for being here tonight. I think there was a fascinating discussion, and we touched on many, many important topics. And as I said, you know, we could discuss this for hours. So if you have more questions, comments to make, please approach us after the meetup. We'll still be here for a little while. Thank you all for being here tonight. Such a crowded room, and also quite a few attendees online. Thank you for sticking with us. Please come to the next Data Lab event as well. And finally, we are organizing DataFest again, which from outside is our big annual conference that we will hold in May. Tickets are now on sale. If you want to join us for more interesting discussions, please come along. And finally, there's something new that we're doing for the Data Lab community in 2025. So you are sort of our guinea pigs here. We're collecting feedback at the end of our meetups now. And we would really appreciate if you'd answer the few questions following that link up there, just to help us improve and plan for the next event. Have a wonderful evening, all of you, and hopefully see you next time. Thank you.